So now we're going to work on a contour line drawing. A contour line is going to describe the outermost edge of an object. So as we look at this lemon and the leaves, we're going to use as sensitive of a line as we can to describe the form and shape of each object. And we'll also take a look at the negative space between all of the leaves. So for this drawing, you can look at the paper, look at the page, try and make it as proportional and as accurate as you can. We're not going to worry too much about shadows, and I'm not going to worry about the background. We're just going to focus on the lemon itself and the leaves and all the little branches that are poking out. I'm going to use the same graphite mechanical pencils that I went over last week. But if you want to use charcoal, you're free to do that. If you want to just use a regular pencil, that works too. You just want to keep it pretty sharp for this. If your pencil starts to get really dull, you're going to lose that variability in the line quality. So I'm starting off with the smaller, thinner mechanical pencil, and then I'll use the larger one later on to get a little bit darker. And I'm doing this in my sketchbook. If you want to do it on a big piece of drawing paper, that's fine too. And as I start out, I'm just gonna block in a couple of simple lines just to kind of get a grip on where this is going to go on my page. I don't want to crop it at all. I don't want to draw it too small either. I want to make sure this fits onto my page in a nice way. So I am kind of thinking about the composition of the open 2 pages here in my sketchbook. I'm going to go across the crease of it again like I did in the last video. So these first few lines are just kind of mapping out where my drawing is going to land. We'll talk more about creating an envelope shape for a drawing. We'll talk about that over the next few weeks. So for now, just put in some lines just to mark off some of the boundaries. It doesn't have to be perfect. None of these lines have to be perfectly accurate from the start. We're just going to put down a really light foundation, and then we'll make corrections as we go, and then we'll commit to some of the darker contour lines of each shape. It's good to go from general to specific, so I'm not trying to copy each individual leaf, especially in that area where it's really densely packed with lots of different leaves. Just trying to get a general sense of a big, simple shape and how they relate to that shape of the lemon at the bottom. So I'm thinking about what's at the absolute bottom of this drawing, probably where the lemon is touching that countertop, and then where each of the leaves goes all the way out to the right and to the left and towards the top of the page. Again, I don't want to run off the page here accidentally. For any drawing that we do this semester, it's important to keep things simple, light, and soft in the beginning. It's always easy to make a drawing darker and sharper and more complex. It's a lot harder to make a drawing lighter. It's harder to simplify an already complex drawing. And it's harder to make a sharp edge soft. So if we keep things soft and light and simple in the beginning for as long as we can, it's going to be a lot easier to build up layers of complexity on top of that. So you can tell I'm still mapping things out. I might be getting a little bit darker, but I haven't fully committed to articulating a really detailed contour line just yet. So take as much time as you need here. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. Doesn't have to be a masterpiece. This is our first real drawing that we're doing here. So don't stress yourself out. It's okay if the leaves look a little bit different, if they're in a slightly different spot than they are in the photo. The point of this assignment is to just get you thinking about line quality and what that can do for a drawing. If it were a portrait, if we were mapping out the features of a face of someone that you know or a loved one, then we'd spend a little bit more time making sure they land in the perfect spot to get a likeness. But for now, with these leaves, these organic shapes, you can just kind of put them in a close enough spot. Another thing that can help with an image like this is thinking about positive and negative space. So, or positive and negative shapes, you could say. The positive shapes here would be the lemon and the leaves. The negative shapes would be the white background or the air between them. When we talk more about measuring, we can talk more about how to use those negative shapes as a guide for mapping these things out. But even for right now, just think about drawing the negative shapes between the leaves as much as you're drawing the positive shapes of the leaves themselves. If that's confusing, feel free to send me a message and I can explain it further. Even though I'm getting a little bit more detailed and complex, I'm still drawing really, really lightly. If you squint, it's hard to even see my drawing at all. Remember that it's harder to erase dark lines. So if you make a mistake, if it's drawn on really lightly and softly, that's easy to come back from. So I'm using the other pencil, starting to get a little bit darker here. I think they're the same softness. I think they're both 2B, the graphite, but the tip is just kind of longer and broader, so I can get different kinds of textures out of it, so I prefer to use this one for drawing the outer contour line here. But I'm starting to look really closely. I'm trying to use some of that information I got out of the blind contour drawing and laying that over this more accurate foundational drawing that I have beneath it. And I want to just go in and articulate that outer contour line as truthfully as I can. So if you have the reference photo downloaded from Canvas and you can zoom in on it, you can look really closely at each leaf. I know it's not too large here in the video, so make sure you have that image pulled up separately in a different window to make it easier, and you can see it a little bit larger. I'm looking a little bit at the lines within the leaves here, drawing those really light, but that just helps describe the form and the shape of the leaf and how it is coming out towards us. And remember, think about the direction that the leaf is growing in, the direction it's moving in, even though the leaf itself is not moving. Our own visual path through the picture is what creates the movement and flow. So when you draw a line, you're in control of that. Lines are like a highway system or like a circulatory system of a picture. They're a pathway that brings us around. Every line that we draw creates a shape on either side of it, even if it's negative space. And then lines can also be created by putting two shapes next to each other. But just remember that as you drag your pencil across your paper, every line creates a shape on either side. Just like we did in the last drawing, experiment with how much pressure you're putting onto the pencil and then onto the paper from there, and how that affects your line. Even with a ballpoint pen, you can get a lot of variability out of the line weight. And when I use the word weight to describe the kind of line, like a heavier line would be darker and thicker. A lighter line would be more thin and not as dark. So lines have a sense of gravity. I feel like they have a sense of speed. I think of darker lines as being slower and lighter lines as being faster. And that might be subjective. You don't have to agree with that, but as long as you're thinking about it, that's what matters to me. So think about how line can really tell a story. Even if it's a simple story, there can be a sense of narrative in your lines. Another thing to pay attention to is overlaps, where one form overlaps with another. So it might be one leaf in front of the other, or it might be the same leaf folding over itself. Try to represent that as clearly as you can. Because if you think of the outermost edge of each of these objects, that's what a contour line is describing, the outermost edge. You could think of it like a horizon. So even the horizon itself, when we look out at the ocean, there's a sense of line out there of the ocean ending and the sky beginning. It's really just the form of the earth turning away from us, the outermost edge of the planet we're on. So when we think about a still life object like this, even if we look at that edge of the lemon, we know the lemon rolls back in space, but we can only see that outermost edge. I think of that as its own little horizon line. So that's what our contour lines here are representing. So if they get overlapped by something else, if that little horizon line, if that contour line is interrupted by another form passing in front of it, that's important information for the viewer. That tells us a lot about what is in front of what. Especially when we get into perspective drawing and creating a sense of space, overlaps become very, very important. So if you want to try and even exaggerate it, be extra clear about how one form passes in front of another, maybe the line that passes in front is darker and the one that goes behind is lighter. Maybe the reverse or the inverse of that. But whatever you do, just try and articulate that as clearly as you can, especially with how all of these leaves are interacting. The relationships between them matter just as much as the leaves themselves, and that all comes down to drawing those overlaps as clearly as you can. So take your time with this drawing. Relax and enjoy it. Remember to breathe. Take deep breaths. And think about how much can you get just out of a line drawing. Without cross-hatching, without thinking about light or shadow shapes. How much information can you contain in a single line, whether it's a sense of gravity or speed or the amount of light or some kind of a story of what's overlapping in front of what. Push yourself to see how focused you can be and how thoughtful each mark can be on the page. If you feel like you work very, very slowly and sort of nervously, don't be afraid. Trust the line that you're going to draw. And if you feel like you work really, really quickly and you finish this drawing in 10 minutes, that's too fast. Please slow down. Push yourself to draw more slowly, pay more attention, look more deeply. Every exercise we do in this class is an exercise in seeing as much as it is in drawing. So the faster you draw, the more you might be missing out on. So I'm not saying it's better to draw fast or slow. Everyone's going to draw at a different speed, and that's okay, but it's not a race. All right, thanks everybody. I'll see you all next week. Good luck.